Well, first, I'm very grateful to you for saying that about the dossier. The dossier took about 8 years to produce because we worked with political organizations from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, including the Andre Blouin Cultural Center in Kinshasa. Andre Blouin is a very important person. She was a close advisor to Patrice Lumumba, who was assassinated, now what, 70 years ago. Andre Blouin was a very important thinker, person who tried to develop a kind of sovereignty politics for both the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Central African Republic, that part of the world. Yeah. So I'm really happy that you mentioned the dossier itself. We did the dossier because we were concerned, and I mean, I particularly feel this is important. I'm concerned about the sudden, you know, liberal worry about the exploitation of Africa.
Cheap
Where does
labor.
this come from? Yeah, where does this come from? I mean, it was perfectly okay for Cecil Rhodes, for instance, to exploit Rhodesia, named after him, South Africa, the Rockefellers and the Oppenheimer family, and the mining and so on. Perfectly okay. Perfectly okay for the Europeans and United States to get together in Berlin in 1885 and actually sit with a map and divide up the continent, including making some crazy decisions like about the Gambia River, forming that into a British colony, whereas all around it, Senegal, French colony. Today in the Gambia, they speak, apart from their own languages, English, and around them, people speak French in Senegal, apart from their own languages, Wolof and so on, which is a common language. But still, divided up. Why? Because there's a river that went through what was then to be French West Africa. Okay, so that was fine. It was okay to go and assassinate from Patrice Lumumba to Thomas Sankara, 1987. Any African leader that tried to stand up, build the sovereignty of their country, they could be assassinated. All that was okay. That's interesting. And suddenly, out of almost nowhere, 20 years ago, great concern was shown by the United States, Western media about what was happening in Africa. They started talking about blood diamonds, then blood coltan, blood gold is the most recent in through the Sahel and so on. Where does this sudden worry come from? Very interesting. As soon as the Western multinational corporations started to face a commercial challenge from companies elsewhere, not just from China, from India. I mean, Indian firms operating in Ethiopia, in Eastern Africa, including Tanzania and so on. It's not just Chinese firms. The media often just makes it seem that China is the only game in town. Lots of companies coming from other parts of the global south, India, Indonesia, and so on, operating on the African continent. The moment Western companies faced a challenge in the bidding process, completely open bidding process, commercial bidding process, they started to complain about unfair practices, exploitation of labor, and so on. That's the first thing. This is not to say that there's no exploitation of labor or oppression of people and so on. It's just interesting that it took a contest, the, let's say, competitive part of capitalism to come into play for the West suddenly to say, oh my God, it's unfair. When they had a monopoly or near monopoly, everything was fine. It was okay to extract the uranium from the mines in the DRC, or they extract the uranium from the mines in Niger and take it all to France. That was fine. But the moment somebody else came and said, hey, I want to also bid for the uranium, then unfair practices. That's the first point I want to make. The second point is that an strange kind of environmentalism comes in, where good thinking, sensitive people say that, well, you shouldn't extract the minerals from your country. It's a critique around the term extractivism. It's really bad to extract the minerals, keep them in the ground. In other words, what you're telling the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is one of the richest countries in the world in terms of minerals, $2.5 trillion is the minimum value of the minerals under the ground, but it has one of the poorest populations in the world. What you're telling people in the DRC is you should just live in poverty. It's okay. when we could extract the minerals, it was fine. Extractivism was okay. But now that the Chinese and others are coming in, Indians, and building factories and so on, we think it's a bad idea. We think you should keep it in the ground. So the second very interesting point is that this environmental concern suddenly appears to tell people they shouldn't control their own sovereign land. Now, it's interesting. Nobody's saying that you should, drill and dig and destroy your country. But there are ways of mining things without being entirely devastating. It's not an either or. At the same time, the real question isn't about the environment. The real question is who gets to control the benefits of the mining? Should it be a Canadian mining company or an Australian mining company that extracts the raw materials and takes it out of the country? Or should it be the people themselves? This is the same debate that is held all over the world. In India, for instance, is it the case that in Orissa, the Adivasi people or the indigenous people of the area are saying, look, don't take the stuff out of the ground? What most of them are saying is, we are getting no benefit from this. We're not getting schools, we're not getting anything. You get a company coming from elsewhere, extracting the materials and taking it away. What about us? We want control, we want ownership, we want sovereignty. So the central theme in our work is this debate around sovereignty. These countries want sovereignty. Interesting, the Chinese showed up in these countries and said, okay, we're going to work with you. We're going to help you industrialize your country. We don't want to just take the raw materials and take it to China. That creates problems for us. We would prefer that you process it in the DRC and you make an industrial capacity increase. In fact, in China, the last 2 years, there's been a big debate about how to have industrialization in Africa. At the China-Africa Summit, this has been a major theme in the last two summits, industrialization of Africa. This is a question which hasn't been posed in the continent for at least 50 or 60 years. People have not posed the question, industrialization. Zambia. Should Zambia allow the copper to just be removed, driven across the border into Uganda in trucks? Borders which I've visited where there's absolutely no octroi, the trucks just go past because somebody is being bribed or nobody cares? Or should you have control over your copper, process it, make copper wires, make high quality copper goods, and then export those goods? You have value added, you're able to control the revenue. You don't, are not a victim of transfer payments and so on. So that's the agenda we wanted to put on the table, that, look, it's not about, like a kind of radical environmentalism, because that's racist. That's telling people you should never have electricity in your houses. You should just live in a museum so that we can come and visit you. That's a racist attitude. And also this idea that China is the problem. It's a ludicrous idea because, what the Chinese are doing is something different. Also, they're not behaving grotesquely different from Western or Australian mining companies. It's not, qualitatively worse. It's about the same. Business people are business people, okay? There's a ruthlessness amongst them. In the core, they are ruthless. So, yes, there's a contest happening. Unfortunately, the United States seems largely to be losing the contest overall. Here and there are little victories like the Lopito corridor with Angola. But, by and large, they lose. Why? Why are they losing this? Because the Chinese have an enormous surplus. They can walk into a community and say, hey, we're going to build a hospital, we're going to build a high-speed rail, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. United States can't. The US cannot come in and even put in enough money to match a Chinese bid, let alone the secondary aspects of the bid, the hospital, this. And I was surprised to talk to an executive who told me that when the Chinese come in and they build hospitals and so on, that's corruption. I said, how is it corruption to build a public hospital? Like, what's corrupt? He said they're bribing the country to get the deal. Yes, exactly. They're bribing the country, but they're not bribing individuals. They're bribing the whole society. They are saying, give us the deal and you get a hospital, a school, high-speed rail. I would take that bribe any day, any day.
This narrative of cheap labor also reminded me of, I mean, there are not a lot of work on this, but I have noticed it how when Japan and Germany or even France, they were industrializing after the Second World War, the narrative in the US was our companies are trying to rebuild them because they are our allies now. When China emerged as the industrial power, it's cheap labor again. Now you have to shed tears for labor and everything.
Hi, my name is Ayushman. I, along with Jyotisman, have started this platform. In the last 2 years, we have tried to build content for the left and progressive forces. We have interviewed economists, historians, political commentators, and activists so far. If you have liked our content so far and want us to build an archive for the left, I have two requests for you. Please do consider donating for the cause. Link is in the description below. Also, if you are not able to do so, don't feel sad. You can always like our videos and share our videos to your comrades. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.